Ladies, gentlemen, very, 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 very welcome at FSR Talks. At FSR Talks, we talk about what? About research, about thinking, being done outside of France school, but being very, very interesting, and that all of us should know more. Today, energy communities. Many things are changed by energy transition and digitalization. For example, you all know that each of us, if we are wealthy enough, we can produce the energy we consume. And we are prosumers. But something else is also possible. We can do it together. We are not obliged to be individual. We can voluntarily do something with our consumption or investments or production. We can create a community, an energy community. This is really new and striking. But are these communities really delivering something to energy transition, to tackling climate change? And we are in such a big energy crisis. Are these energy communities delivering something to tackle the crisis? That's exactly what we are going to discuss. At France School, we have a wizard, an expert for energy communities. He is Nicolò Rossetto. He will be seconded by Ashwita Tunga. Ashwita is from India France School. France School outside EU is located in India, and they will be the debaters. And we will have several speakers. Everything will be introduced by Nicolò. Nicolò, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jean-Michel, for the kind introduction, and welcome to all the numerous participants to this FSR talk. As Jean-Michel said, today we are lucky because we have the editors of the latest book on energy communities. I have a copy on my desk, so I am very happy to have here with us Sabine Lőbbe from Reutlingen University, David Robinson from the Oxford Institute for Energy Studies, and then also Fereidoon Sioshansi from Menlo Economics. If you want, you can also switch on your camera if you can, Fereidoon. And they are joining all of us today to provide us with some insights of the book they edited, and also to discuss this important topic of energy communities in the framework of the energy crisis that is deeply affecting Europe nowadays, but actually not only Europe, because problems are reverberating all over the world. I know that Fereidoon might need to leave us a bit earlier than the end of the talk. So I would like to give the screen, first of all, to him, and then we will go back to, we'll go ahead with Sabine and David. So please, Fereidoon, your initial remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both Jean-Michel and Nicolò, for the intro. Can you hear me and see me okay? Excellent. Well, it's, I guess, good afternoon for those of you in Europe, and It's super early morning for those of you in America, and I suppose wherever else you're tuning in. So welcome in any case. And as you can see, I'm speaking to you from a hotel room in Guadalajara, Mexico. And the reason I have to leave a little early is that I'm attending a workshop today at the university here. But nevertheless, it's a very international, and it's very interesting that myself, Sabine, and David happen to be in 3 different countries, speaking to you wherever you may be. Anyway, before I forget, I also want to ask or thank FSR, Jean-Michel, our good friend, and of course, Nicolò and his colleagues for organizing this event and giving us an opportunity to say a few words. The topic today is community energy or energy communities. And so I'd like to take just a few minutes, and we changed the order of the presentation so that in case I have to leave a little earlier than the session's ended. So I will try, excuse me, to explain the simple motivation for doing this particular book. The simple answer is that the 3 of us, the co-editors of the book, I think we collectively agreed the time has arrived for community energy, or if you preferred, energy communities. And I will try to explain that in simple terms and sort of give you a couple of examples that I'm familiar with that I think make some sense, that why we have arrived at this junction. So I'm going to go back and start with maybe a decade or so ago, when people were starting to put solar panels on their roofs in many parts of the world, California included. In the process, we saw the migration of some consumers to what we call prosumers. So they produce part or most of the energy they need. So that was the first aha. Okay, now customers are not totally, if you have a roof and you live in a sunny area and you can afford the solar panels, you're not totally reliant on your local distribution network and so forth, at least for sunny hours of the day. So a lot of people have been talking about that, writing about it, myself included. Then came the crashing cost of distributed storage. So people said, aha, I can now store some of that excess solar during the sunny hours of the day and use it at night and balance my consumption and storage and generation. So we call that, I guess you can call it prosumager. That's a prosumer with storage. Or you can call it if you have a lot of storage and you don't actually use any net kilowatt hours, I suppose you can call them a non-sumer. It's a strange kind of consumer that uses some energy from the grid, but on average in a year may use 0 net kilowatt hours. So it's a kind of an interesting phenomena. So again, I've been talking about this and thinking about it, as you have, Nicolò, and everyone else. These have been topical issues. Then came we added digitalization, two-way communication, aggregation, software, artificial intelligence. All of these allowed a third party, an aggregator of some sort, to come and put a bunch of these prosumagers together and manage that collective portfolio. So that adds a huge dimension. That adds far more capability. Individuals can only do so much, and it gets expensive after a while. But if you combine a number of prosumagers together and manage their portfolio, it has a lot of advantages. So in fact, there's a book that I edited, and I think both David and Sabine contributed to, focused on beyond and behind the meter, which we talked about all of these issues. So we have pushed, I guess, the envelope to as far as we could. And now we're reaching a stage where something even more interesting and more revolutionary is possible. And that is to actually form an energy community. So instead of just having an aggregator sort of assemble a bunch of people, maybe the people will form or join some form of community. And of course, Nicolò maybe later on can tell us some of the ways that this can be done. There's a lot of issues about how, whether these communities are physical, virtual, or how they're organized, who runs the community, who owns the community, that sort of thing. But so my simple answer to the question, why did we do a book on energy communities? It's that I think it's the simple extension of everything that has happened to now. And now we're looking at the next step. We're pushing the envelope, if you will. So let me give you some, again, for those of you who are not familiar with the concept, and this thing may sound a bit abstract, let me give you a couple of examples. And these are both from California, but nevertheless, it hopefully gives you some idea of what we're talking about. The first example I'm going to give you is a solar installation company called Sonova. It's one of the largest solar installers in North America. They're active in Canada and the US. And Sonova recently proposed to the state regulator in California, the California Public Utilities Commission, they said, allow us to work with builders and developers to develop communities of 500 to 2,000 consumers, build a private distribution network for a brand new community, and privately own and operate this microgrid. Their proposal says every home in this new community would have solar panels, would have batteries. The community would be built ground up with the local distribution network, with the idea that you optimize generation, storage, and consumption for the whole community. So it's, in this case, the Sonova's proposal is a physical community of 500 to 2,000 homes built together in a single neighborhood, if you will. So such a community, however, will not be off-grid, and I must emphasize that. The community would be connected to the grid. It would sell the excess generation when it cannot store it or consume it, and when prices are favorable, and they would pick up the deficit when the reverse happens. So these are not off-grid communities. They take advantage of the grid. They support the grid in many ways, but they are a small privately owned community. So this is an example, and this, by the way, this proposal has been very strongly opposed by the distribution monopolies in California, because they see it as a major threat to their future growth and so forth and so on. So I'm not saying this is necessarily a done deal, but the fact that somebody came with a solid proposal, I thought was very interesting. And by the way, in their proposal, Sonova estimated that they can provide an equal or better quality service to consumers at 20% lower cost than what the current incumbent utilities were providing. So it's at least, on paper, it looks like it's a good idea to proceed. I'll give you a second quick example before I wrap up, and that is the example of Stanford University, which is a major university not far from where I live. Stanford University operates its campus as a private utility. It's actually a small utility. It has solar plants outside campus that produce energy The campus has a large storage system which can store a lot of that excess solar and so forth. But again, it's not off-grid. It's connected to the California grid. If it has shortages, it buys it from California ISO. If it has excess and the prices are right, it sells it. So it's a constantly in communication with the ISO, and in fact supports the grid in a very attractive way. So this is an example, and the reason that it works in case of Stanford is that they actually, from many, many years ago, they built a distribution system themselves. So it's privately owned. So you can say Stanford University has a private, non-for-profit microgrid, which is nevertheless connected to the grid. Now, why are these two examples interesting? Well, I think the examples are interesting because a single entity sees the final bill for the energy and is accountable to pay the bill. So an energy community, that's one of the problems. Who sees the bill? If it's 500 people in an energy community, do they get 500 bills, or does one entity get the bill and tries to minimize it? That's one of the interesting aspects. How do you organize the community so that a single entity is responsible for managing and optimizing? And I think these are some of the issues that Sabine and David are going to further talk about. So I think we have certainly arrived at a junction in time where it's not unrealistic to push this prosumer and aggregation and software and optimization, all these things that we've been talking about for many years, one step further. So I think the question I'm going to end at this point is basically the question is, what is there not to like about this type of idea? And I think what is there not to like is there's a lot of questions about how we will organize these communities, who would manage and run them, what are the liabilities, how do the regulators view them, how do they price the energy within the community, things like that, which, again, my co-editors are going to answer the tough questions. I'm going to have fun and kind of give you the big picture of why I think it's interesting to have energy communities and talk about this topic. So that's as much as I'd like to say at this point. I really appreciate your interest. If there is any clarification type questions, Nicolò, from you or from
No,
the audience?
I think that you provide a very nice introductory picture, example of these microgrid-centered energy communities, the problem of benefit sharing, management of the interactions within the community. Maybe just one quick question for you, Fereidoon, is from Eric Vermeulen, one of the people that are watching us. He wonders whether you know what's the origin of the discount that Sanova claims. How can they make a 20% discount on the energy they provide to the members of the communities they are going to develop? Do you have any idea on this, Fereidoon? Commodity network charges?
The short answer is that there's no debt, there's no extra baggage. You know, Sanova will work with a developer to build a community with cost optimization in mind. Simple. When the incumbent utility does, their interest, at least in the California context, they're not really interested in minimizing costs. They're interested in investing as much as the regulator would allow, put it in rate base, and earn a return for their shareholders. They have a different business model. The Sanova and the Stanford University example I gave you, neither has that kind of a shareholder benefit. They're sort of you can say they're non-for-profit concept. So that's part of the savings. Part of it is just when you start from scratch with a new community, you can optimize everything and don't have that large overhead of the utility. but I don't have to find numbers. I think Eric can probably go to the California Public Utilities Commission and maybe actually download the actual application where I think some of the numbers will be there. But good question.
Thank you, Fereidoon. But actually, you provide a good hint that, of course, when you build something new and very focused, you can optimize and you can explore economies of scope between network element, generation element, consumption element of this microgrid. So I think we can now turn to Sabine. Please, you may introduce your first remarks, Sabine.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicolò. So I'll just give you a short overview of the content of the book. That's basically what I was supposed to do in the first round. Well, as Fereidoon said, we came together and had a look at the issue, and what I'm going to present to you now is about what the book is about, what key questions and answers we found in very brief manner. Got like 6 minutes, and I think I should do it less. So the book itself, I mean, Fereidoon already started giving the reason why we think this is important. The book is about 3 challenges requiring re-evaluation of the consumer's role, the way we think about it. It's the fact that distributed energy resources are growing rapidly, as we all know, and energy produced close to or on customer sites is renewable generally. And consumers might take responsibility for stability and security of supply in our energy context, in our energy systems, just by evolving from being a load to being a prosumer, individually or as groups. And groups, of course, is the key about that. So we think that citizens are central. The more renewables, the more distributed renewables, the more they are central to the energy system. And at the same time, once they investment becomes more decentralized as well. So regulation and policy must integrate active citizens, to our mind, and the energy communities are a possible solution. So that's why we addressed this issue. The picture you see there is not a new one, of course, as you can see. It's from the US. It's one of the co-ops that have been developed there at a time when electrification took place. And it's the same thing all over the world. I mean, it's been the same in Germany. It is the same on other places in the world right now. So this is not a new concept, if you want to. People come together and say, we want electricity. So that's a very basic issue at the core of the whole thing. So the book is divided into 4 chapters. We developed or brought together concepts on regulatory framework from selected countries. We got into depth regarding the appeal of citizens and customers. And it's 2 notions. It's citizens, it's all of us, and customers are those being a member of the community. So there's a question of what is it? A customer? Is it a customer of the community, or is it a member of the community? So that's lots of different notions that are very explicit and say something about the whole concept. We'll have to get into detail that part. Enabling technologies, community design, and business models. We need lots of new bits and pieces in order to get things done, and that's being described in this 3rd chapter. And I think, honestly, we need some sort of standardization in order to get things not only done, but multiplied and transferred on a larger scale. And then we've got some case studies and implementation issues. You see the countries the contributions came from. It's about 25 chapters from all over the world. There's some sort of more from the Northern Hemisphere, but transfer from the Global South is a very interesting issue as well. So just 3 findings, and it comes back to the questions we put into the beginning of the book. We think that energy communities are part of a broader movement towards community energy. So what are we sharing? We're sharing not just energy on different time scales, We're also sharing services regarding renewables, regarding storage, optimization, supply, charging, trading. So there's lots of new applications developing into these communities as well. There's joint investment in renewables and storages. Lots of cooperatives consider themselves to be energy communities, and that's an important issue as well, because there's no clear definition about what energy communities are, and the understanding of this notion all over the world is quite different. Sometimes Europeans think it's clear because it's in our regulation. When you look at EU regulation, you find definitions about it, renewables and citizen energy communities, but that's not what other people in the world think about energy communities. So often it's about beliefs and values to engage citizens in the energy transition. This is an important issue as well. It's not just sharing or trading or putting energy together or investing. It's also about beliefs and values. And it's a social issue as well, like addressing equity, poverty reliefs, or job development. So who shares? It's, of course, first of all, in the beginning phase, it's scientists researching, it's grassroots-oriented companies, cooperatives, NGOs, and so on. But there are lots of profit-oriented companies in this business as well, startups, cooperatives, energy suppliers, as Fereidoon already has addressed, and providers. And then, of course, they are not the only ones to really do what energy communities are made of. We need delivery services for these energy communities on different issues. You can find in this and these some points. And there are facilitators. And then we come to regulation, national, regional, municipal governments putting up laws in favoring these energy communities, or having a regulation that's not really apt to allowing this sort of energy communities. Or there are companies facilitating zones for example, for EV charging networks, renewable generation, and so on. There are also bits and pieces that facilitate energy communities in very concrete issues. So to wrap it all up, to be sustainable and practical, energy communities need to be customer-centered. And customer means the one participating in energy communities in whatever role. Is it a consumer, a prosumer, a whole bunch of it. So they must attract citizens to participate actively in the energy community or to buy the services from energy communities. Not each and every member reflects about his energy supply or consumption the whole day over. Mostly people have other things in mind, but they might nonetheless be members of energy communities. So they are more prone to participating, but maybe buying services in this context. Energy communities should be market-driven. That's our belief. They should be integrated into the existing and the evolving future market design. So it may be part of a solution, but it needs to be integrated in energy systems, in energy markets. And it should be welfare enhancing, referring to the welfare of members of the energy community and the non-members. I think David will come back to this issue later on, which is quite important. It's not in order to optimize energy communities as is, but it's the question of what is their contribution to the energy system in total. So just, I'll leave it on that at that point. Maybe we come back to one of these issues during our discussion. And I just like to point to one thing we'll be handling on November 16th as Reutlingen University. We'll have a research colloquium on our book where we get into details on some of the issues of our contributions. And actually, we're very happy that Nicolò will be joining us and giving us a much more in-depth and interesting overview of taxonomy on energy communities as one of the highlights of this event. So I'll just put this link into the chat later on. Well, thanks a lot for the time being.
To you, Sabine. Yes, you raise several interesting points, in particular the last one, because you said that we observe the emergence of energy communities here and there. They can be of different types. There could be different motivations behind them. But from a policy point of view, a policy perspective, the regulators, legislator should take decisions also based on the impact of these new entities on the system and on society more in general. You mentioned welfare enhancing. And actually this is very interesting nowadays because as we said earlier, Europe, but not only Europe, is suffering the worst energy crisis since the 1970s. And here and there have been suggestions why not to use energy communities to promote them in the context of this crisis as a way out. And on this, I would like to listen to the view of David, who look at this topic. So please, David, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Nicolò. Yes, Fereidoon has sort of set the scene, and I'll overlap a little bit with what he said and with what Sabine said, but I want to focus on this, if you want, the energy transition and the crisis. So it's really focused very much on Europe, but I guess, as you say, it affects everybody. My general message is that an accelerated energy transition is a key to not just resolving the immediate crisis, but avoiding future crises. And that's largely because it reduces the if you want, the dependence on imported gas, not only from Russia, but more generally imported fossil fuels, which are, if you want, out of our control. That's one thing. But that also means that all measures, in my view, all measures to address the energy crisis should support the energy transition. That is not true for many measures that have been introduced. For instance, measures which lower prices for all consumers, supports consumers who don't need support, are very expensive and often will increase demand, which is not helping in the fight against, if you want, against reliance on imported fossil fuels. We're also intervening in ways which may discourage future investment in the energy transition by creating risks for investors. So I personally would focus more on measures which definitely are going to not only help with the crisis, but also accelerate the transition. And I am convinced that energy communities are one of those measures, one of those mechanisms or a means to do both things at the same time. So what I'd like to do is to, first of all, a few comments sort of overlapping with what Fereidoon said on what the energy transition is really about with respect to consumers, citizens. And then secondly, I'd like to explain how the energy communities can, if you want, can empower consumers, and then look at how the impact that that an energy community can have in terms of its if you want, addressing the war, and then some final comments on how to improve energy communities so that they're easier to set up and to run. Well, first of all, just simply to say that the energy transition is about consumer empowerment. It's about power to the people, as Fereidoon was saying. I think in particular, we know that it's about renewable energy, and it's about electrification. Now, renewable energy is empowers consumers because it gives them some freedom to make decisions for themselves about how they're going to generate and use electricity. If they have other mechanisms, other sort of, they have storage, and if they have electric vehicles, even more. But basically, we're talking about choice, but we're also talking about how these, both the renewables and the electric vehicles, or for that matter, heat pumps that reduce demand for gas, how they affect, if they help everybody who is trying to deal with the war, as well as decarbonizing the system. begin with, the renewables are going to lower prices that consumers are currently facing. They're in spot markets today. Most consumers, anyway, who are affected by the central system energy are paying very high prices, and having your own renewables along with storage is a way of reducing those prices. I think also electric heating. So I should say also what we're doing is we're reducing the demand for gas by using the electric renewable electricity. Secondly, the electric heating, heat pumps, for instance, lowers demand for gas, which might otherwise be produced from gas boilers. And both of these, reduction in demand for gas is lowering indirectly global gas prices. Okay, and I think that we're trying not to reduce demand for electricity, but to reduce demand for electricity produced by gas. Okay, and so I think it's important to realize that there's a real benefit that's not only being enjoyed by the individuals who are doing this, but all consumers, because we are also lowering the price of electricity throughout, if you want, the countries where these communities are being set up. So that's sort of the what's in it for consumers is very much also for individual consumers is also very much for the rest of the system, all consumers. But if we then ask, well, so energy communities, as Fereidoon was saying, takes it to the next stage, where we're talking about, I would say, a much more powerful means of expressing consumer, if you want, the preferences, and also encouraging the energy transmission to move forward, and also dealing with the war. Why is this? Well, first of all, because it opens the door to many more people who couldn't otherwise have, say, solar energy because they don't have the means, or they may not have a roof. So that it opens the door to people who otherwise would not have it. Policy should also, and we'll talk about this later, but include vulnerable, people who might otherwise, if you want, be exposed to very high electricity prices. Participating in electricity community is a way for them to benefit, and this is something that policy should be aiming to do. It's a good way to subsidize people, is to help them to lower their demand or to be using electricity produced from renewable energy. The second reason why communities make a difference is because they provide scale. And by providing scale, they lower the cost of the renewables, of the storage. They also, through the scale, they enable optimization, as Fereidoon was saying, the optimization of multiple users with different time dimensions when they're consuming, enables the reduction in the overall costs, and it also creates the potential for the community to be selling energy to the system. And so we've got an entity which can optimize the use of the resources within the community, sell energy to the system, and when necessary, buy it from the system, something which individual consumers would find extremely difficult. So it's a very powerful tool. And I think we should also not forget that energy communities provide resilience in case there are serious problems on the, if you want, the bulk grid. Energy communities provide a backup. They may be individuals, of course, could have backup from their electric vehicle if they had one and a battery. But when a community has a combined storage and renewable energy, we have resilience that can cope in moments when the rest of the system is down. In fact, we can even design it so that we can help to black start the system. So I think we see energy communities as having a real benefit, not only for the people who are in it, but also for people who are outside. And let's not forget one other one, which is often mentioned when we're talking about energy communities in Europe, and that's the creation of economic activity inside the community itself. It can be jobs that are related to the if you want, putting on solar panels or managing the system. It's basically creating economic activity. And I think let's not forget another really important one, this idea of community, of working together in supporting the energy transition. This is, I think, vital for political reasons as well. Communities feeling as though they can see some benefit to actively participate in the transition. So again, how does this contribute to the addressing the war? Well, the obvious ones are that renewables are helping to lower the use of natural gas. That if we're able actually to electrify gas boilers and sort of turn them into, so if you want adopt electric heating, then we're also reducing the demand for gas. And I think we're also in a position to be helping the most vulnerable as we go through this, which is especially important when prices are very high. So let me then just talk briefly about, if you want, the problems. No, I don't want to go into details about the problems, but we're talking about many countries which have not yet transposed the EU electricity directive, which provides the basis for setting up these communities. And I think that's a fundamental first step to have some national legal basis for energy communities to begin their operations. The second thing, which is clear to all energy communities, have trouble financially to get started. Raising money is difficult, and I think the Recovery and Resilience Fund is a source of funding for the energy communities. And I think that that many countries are now looking for ways to use that in that way. Also, they have trouble getting permits. Often the local distribution company is slow to provide permits to erect or to install solar panels. And this is, I don't know whether this is just sort of a typical sort of bureaucratic problem, or there may be some reason to go slow. But in any case, we have to speed that up. I think also the auctions, for instance, in some countries for central auctions for renewables should explicitly include energy communities as recipients, if you want, of some of the potential benefits of those central auctions. And I think it's really important that when we're talking about energy communities, they have a level playing field when it comes to taking part in all the markets to which they are entitled to participate. We're talking about, congestion markets, wholesale markets for energy. We're talking also about capacity markets. Whichever markets are there, these entities should be able to do that. And frankly, right now, energy communities are not prepared to do that. They don't have the capacity, and they're going to need capacity and training to be able to do that. There's also we're going to need to rethink the rules and obligations for energy communities, which are not the same as aggregators. They don't have the same skill set. And so we have to be thinking hard about how to have them on a level playing field and not find barriers to their participation in all these markets. So sort of final comment is that—
because we are running a bit short of time,
sorry.
David,
Final
so
comment.
you can
Final comment. It's just simply that this is just one model for consumer empowerment, and I support it, absolutely. But I think we also have to realize that private entities, not the not-for-profit, but profit-making entities, are also a good way to be thinking about giving power to the people and giving them choice. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, David, for your reflections. I see that the people are posing some questions in the chat. So maybe I can make a short question to Sabine and then Ashrita to David, and then we can keep the last 7-8 minutes to discuss 3 questions from the public. So Sabine, just because I read, of course, the book, I know that you also look at a specific topic that sometimes is, let's say, left a bit for granted or not investigated enough. I mean, the segmentation, the potential segmentation of customers, of citizens, because we assume that customers, families, companies would be happy to join communities, but we rarely mention evidence about these real preferences of these people. And so I would like to know, in your research, if you came up with some results in this regard, if we can segment energy customer to understand whether some of them are more interested than others in joining an energy community. And if you think that this could have implication on the choice, as also David mentioned, to rely more on communities to achieve the goals of energy policy. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks a lot. Maybe I just can include one of the questions from the audience asking for what about companies? Of course, companies are an important important player within communities, energy communities, because either they supply, as you already described, Eric, another load curve, or they also contribute with specific production that might be interesting, like biogas and so on. So of course, they are an important pillar in energy communities quite practically. Now regarding how students are interested in joining energy communities, what we found out is that the large majority, like 75–80% of people are willing to participate in energy community quite generally if it is easy, if it offers uncomplicated participation, and if economic profits or results come to a lower cost. So there is interest but this if is important. And if dig deeper into the details, those planning a PV system, for example, there's like half of the people doing so that are interested in energy communities because they like the idea of sharing and so on. And if you have a look at the market, at least in Germany, and I must say these are results from studies in Europe, more or less, mostly it's Europe. So maybe different elsewhere, but it's a bit Germany biased, but it's Europe. So in Germany, at least, we do have successful business models who sell some sort of community feeling, like Sonnen in Germany. It's not what we consider to be a real energy community, but it shows that there is some interest from people in this community feeling as well. But of course, the concept itself is not really well known so far. So we're always talking about, well, upcoming markets. So regarding the question of what types of households are more interested, you can say, first of all, you cannot really distinguish social demographic factors very well. It's not the main thing to say it's a specific group of social demographic people interested. But there is some sort of higher interest with younger or middle-aged people and better educated individuals that like to join energy communities, larger households more than others. So that's about the thing. But what's much more important are attitudes regarding energy transition, environment, and so on, and knowledge about energy issues. And they augment the likelihood to purchase to get into energy communities. And also those who are interested in, of course, in PV systems, early innovators, early adopters, they are those mostly interested. Now, about what kind of different customer segments are there? There are two groups primarily. Group one is people that are interested in an economic advantage. And that's nearly all of us. But there is another group that additionally likes socially focused propositions, value propositions, around the spirit of a possibility to exchange with other community members, regionality, environmental benefits. There is a group of these people that for all of us, like cost of supply is quite important. If you offer a economic benefit, it makes it easier, so to say.
Thank you.
Yeah, so about what to do on a political issue maybe or regulation, I think there are 3 points very shortly. Sensitize the population for energy production, consumption, inform, arouse interest, and give appeal to energy communities, something that governments might want to do. And I think that we need, David also addressed that sort of support of standardization. If IT software, hardware is able to communicate with each other, it becomes easier. Making it very easy to apply with mobile devices and bringing down costs that way if there is standardization. And maybe support energy communities in public housing, in tenants units, and simplify the on-site consumption, balancing accounting procedures and all this stuff. So in order to get other customer groups, other consumer groups into the system that do not have a place for a PV system, tenants, these kind of people.
Thank you. So to make it easy, to get it fly faster, things should be easy and reasonably viable from an economic point of view. Ashwita.
Thank you, Sabine, for that answer. So now when it comes to the promotion of certain types of energy communities, we see that it seems to rely to a certain extent on the reduction of network and system charges. And when we see the case of Austria, for instance, we see that they plan to reduce the tariffs for the energy communities up to 64% for using the local and regional electricity grids. So David, my question to you would be, do you think that this is a sensible approach? And do you see any limits for its broader application in the days to come?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I should say that if the tariffs we're talking about include policy levies, then I think the first thing to do is to move them to the government budget and not to have them in the tariffs. Because if they stay in the tariffs, then apart from anything else, they're going to discourage electrification. But if they are in the tariffs, I don't think it's a good idea to be reducing them and leaving the consumers who are not in the community to pay higher costs because the community members are no longer making a contribution. So I really think that that it's important to reduce the tariffs to reflect genuine changes in costs. Okay, that the costs that may be the result of lower losses from having local generation, possibly also reduction in the need to reinforce the grid if that's the case. But essentially, we're talking about reducing the if you want the tariffs to reflect the change in the cost, which doesn't mean that we shouldn't find a way to subsidize energy communities. It's just that they should be explicit subsidies and not hidden in tariffs. Okay? By which I mean that I think that energy communities are definitely going to need subsidies to get started. There's a question of learning. There's a question of initial capital investment. There's also, if you want, going to be probably an ongoing cost at the outset, just to make it's going to be a managerial task. So what I'm saying here is that it should be an explicit subsidy, and it should be one that has an expiry date. Okay, so in short, I think there should be reductions, but they should reflect costs, but that there are other ways to subsidize, which I think are justified and that should be, explicit and be with an expiry date.
Thank you. So do not mess things up. I would say your suggestion.
Yes.
Okay, so we have a few minutes left, so it's definitely time to look at the questions from our audience. You answered already to the question by Eric, Sabine. So maybe we can look at the question by Sharif and then also by Gianluca and Valeria. Of course, feel free, Sabine and David, to answer depending on who has the answer exactly. So first, do you see a role for energy communities in the management of congestions at the distribution grid level?
Yes, I certainly do. In fact, I think that one of the main advantages of an energy community is to optimize the consumption or all of the assets which are owned by the members of the community in such a way that they can be not only optimizing internally, but also offering services to the grid. And this is, they would be acting essentially as an aggregator would in if you want, managing the grid. And really, there's, I would say, at least two fundamental sort of requirements for that to happen. One is that the distribution companies have the incentives to, rather than to, if you want to look for wire solutions by building additional grid, that they start to look for non-wire solutions to manage congestion. And for that to happen, as I say, we need new incentives, a new regulatory arrangement for what will be DSOs to do that. We see that in some countries, and particularly in the UK. I think that we should consider energy communities to be just one more potential supplier of that flexibility. And I think that therefore they need to be able to access the markets as well. So it's not just that the incentives exist for the regulators, but also that the energy communities are enabled to participate in those markets.
Unless Sabine wants to add anything, we move to the next question. I think there was Valeria. She asked whether the book addresses issues of optimal size of energy communities, optimal pricing mechanisms for energy communities. Any comment on this, Sabine or David?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question, but there's no answer to that. Not on the spot, at least, I think. I mean, what's optimal? What's the criterion of optimization? Is it cost reduction? Then I'm prone to say the bigger the better, because there's economies of scale, economies of scope, but this is not the idea of an energy community that's supposed to give identity. So optimal regarding the attraction for the customer, for the participant, the member might be an issue. So then it depends on how to position what's the meaning of the community. Is it a local, a regional one? So then the optimal size would be smaller. If it's then saying it's a community of, I don't know, something that's not really bound to regionality. So it's a bad answer to say depends, but that's about would be my opinion about it.
No,
pricing yeah, sorry.
I fully agree with you, Sabine.
Yeah, regarding pricing mechanisms, it's about the same. I mean, this is part of what should be part of the community business model, if you want to, saying how do we want to get the pricing done? There's pricing mechanisms that steer the way the community works. If it's a fixed price thing and you just share, it's something else than saying we trade. We have a peer-to-peer trading mechanism. Both might make sense if it fits with the model in total. So I think there again, it's not there's not the very best pricing mechanism. Sorry for that, but maybe David, you're a great pricing expert, as far as I remember.
I agree with everything you said. My only additional comment would be if you took it's not obvious that consumers respond to price signals. That's one of the problems generally about price signals but aggregators can usually understand the price signals and then help consumers to manage their resources. And a good example of that is smart charging of vehicles. Consumers don't really want to get involved in smart charging, but there are price signals out there, and the aggregator or the optimizer can essentially, once they know what consumers' preferences are with respect to their vehicles, what time they're going to be driving and how much a battery life they have, they've got if you want an optimizer, which is then going to minimize the cost of charging. So I think you don't have to assume in this that price signals will go through to customers for every different item. Rather, you'll see much more in the way of automatic use of resources, especially ones that are idle in the sense that they're sitting there and they can be managed.
Thank you, Sabine. Thank you, David. We exhausted our time. I see there are still a couple of questions, but it will be for another debate. I don't know if you want to wrap up, Jean-Michel, or if you want to add anything.
No, it's obvious that all of us, we are at least consumers, but sometimes we are not very active as consumers. We are on the top citizens, and a few of us are very active as citizens, but in between we have these communities, and community can be the best way to combine consumption, investment, reactions, citizenship, projects vis-à-vis the future. And we all have to think about it, because energy transition is very challenging, very demanding, but in a community, it is an adventure we do together. So nobody is dictating what we decide. We see the benefits and we get the benefits, and we can adapt to what we have decided yesterday and what we will do tomorrow. And I'm very happy having with us India, because this is true in India, it's true in Europe, it's true in all parts of the world, including California, where communities are growing. So communities, in a sense, are a very big part of the future we are building together. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia.
Thank you very much to all. See you next time on FSR Talks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank